Whatever the case may be. He has a 15, I got a 15. Step up your game, sneaker. 15 sneaker. Size 15. I got a 15. Step up your game, sneaker. 15 sneaker. Step up your game, sneaker. 15 sneaker. Okay? Step up your game, sneaker. 15 sneaker. Okay?
Gotta be a freak beat.
RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition, Ariel Cuts, and Liquid Sunrays. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This is your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions on diet, training, supplementation, IFBB pros, competitions, whatever's on your mind, it is all on the tables. We now bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, yesterday we released a video interview that you did with Jorge Betancourt, a name that, if you're familiar with the 90s bodybuilding scene, one of the top young prospects from that time. And we, portrayed the route that he took from being one of the young faces in bodybuilding, now being a flat-out bodybuilding mogul.
Yeah, I know George for years, and, when I was coming up, I used to watch him on ESPN, even though I'm older than him. He was like, a little teen phenomenon, and they, Luz Wick got a hold of him, and they were putting him on TV all the time because they had a show called American Muscle Magazine. That's what we used to watch all the time. Remember, there was no internet back then, so he was very well known. I figured he was making a lot of money from it, and evidently, he was doing well. He won the team nationals. He was on his way, and then, it's very hard emotionally a lot of times for young guys in bodybuilding to take that and then translate it into a successful pro career. And not many have done it. Jay Cutler was one of the few, and Jay didn't even win team nationals, but he won his class there. Branch Warren did it, obviously, and there were a few that were able to, mentally be tough enough to follow through it from the teenage years into their, obviously the top amateur and then pro. George just let it get the best of him. He really, didn't like it anymore, and it was too much pressure, and he got out. He then got pulled back into it because he loved the sport and as a supplement company owner, and then he sold the company to Vitamin Shop, and he made a lot of money. Now he's trying to get back into the industry after his do not compete has been, exhausted. So it's a great story. I think a lot of people, should pay attention to these stories of guys who've started out young, had maybe some troubles in transition, and then kind of figured things out, so to speak, because that's life. I mean, that's all of us go through that. We all have those growing pains, and it's how we deal with them and get past it that makes us and defines us as who we are later in life. And so I loved the interview. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I know George for quite a while, and it was great to talk with him, and I think the fans are responding very favorably to the interview.
That interview right now at RxMuscle.com, and of course, the RxMuscle YouTube channel. Let's go to the questions. The first two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question, if you truly look at the physics of deadlift, the lats, traps, and lower back are used much as stabilizers. As we all now know, isometric exercises do not do as much for building muscle. The hips, controlled mostly by the glutes and hams, and the quads are really the one going through the range of motion. Can you explain why you feel the back is being developed from deadlifts? I see you seem to include this in your plans every other week only.
Yeah, there is a lot of leg involved in deadlifts. There's no doubt about that. But it's one of those movements that just makes you stronger. And when you're stronger, you grow. Think about what you're doing. You're pulling weight off the floor. Yeah, you're using some leg, obviously, some glute and stuff like that. But what's holding the weight? I mean, you're pulling from your traps. Your spinal erectors are finishing the movement. It just thickens your back. And just the sheer aspect of moving that kind of weight off the floor, it involves your entire body. Whether they're stabilizers or main movers, it doesn't matter. That movement makes you stronger for everything you do. And that's the same thing with squats. If you've ever heard the term squats build mass throughout the entire body, it's true. Just because you're squatting and using mostly legs, think about when you have 600 pounds on your back, how much stabilization, how much, how thick the muscle has to be to stabilize that upper body. If you never trained your upper body and had decent legs and trained them, whatever, just doing leg presses and stuff like that, and you went under a squat and never squatted, you'd probably collapse to the floor if you ever put a lot of weight on there, because your upper body needs to be strong to hold that kind of weight. And that's why deadlifts, and that's why, bent rows, and that's why, squats are like total body movements, because they involve the entire body. When you do a bent row, also you're bent over, you have to stabilize with your legs, you have to stabilize with your upper body. That just builds, general, brute strength, and that really helps with development, because let's face it, if you can lift heavier weights, you're going to grow better. A great thing also I just want to bring up about the Dave Palumbo Experience app. I try to bring it up very quickly every week. I don't want to bore you guys, but for people who don't know, it's an app that you can download for your iPhone or to your Android. You just go to the App Store and get it. It's $29 a month. You get access to all the articles I've ever written, all the videos I've ever done, and there's an exclusive Q&A video on there every week, which people don't have access to unless you're an app member. And I cull those questions from the questions that people ask on the app. So all the app members can ask unlimited questions whenever they want. I answer them on the app in a generalized form, so everyone sees the questions and the answers, so everyone gets access to that. And then I take the best ones, and I do a video every week. And we started putting up recently workouts of the week. So you get a free workout as well for the week, and people are loving it. So just tell your friends about it. Once again, it's a great resource to have. There's a couple of them out there, but there are very few people who provide a resource for people to have access to information in one concentrated, place. When I was a kid, I used to go to Encyclopedia Britannica, or I forget, there was another one that I used to use as well. Every time I wanted to look something up, I'd go and look it up there. Nowadays, people go on the internet and go to Wikipedia. But truth be told, there's no real Wikipedia for the kind of stuff that we discuss on this program regarding bodybuilding. So I think people really like the app a lot. Also, I want to just mention, people have been asking, the Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru course is scheduled now on the schedule. It's for the Saturday, June 29th, over here in Cape Coral, Florida, and my office is here. The last class filled up very quickly, so don't wait, guys. I've been having a lot of people ask about this one. You can sign up at DavePalumbo.com. I promise you it's going to sell out. I've already sold half the seats already, so don't wait on this one. It's June 29th.
Let's go to the second question again from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Dave, in your power building program, as an example, it has 8 sets of bench press. It does not take me that many sets to warm up to 4 to 8 reps. I only bench 275 by 6. What would I do on an exercise like this in that program?
Yeah, well, I have a program called the Power, my Power Phase workout, which is like a 6 to 8 week period, like where you're really trying to put mass on. And what it does is it eliminates all the like shaping type exercises, and it allows you to focus exclusively on the main prime mover movements: bench press, bent rows, deadlifts, squats. The mass shoulder presses, the mass builders, and it involves more sets. And the reason it's more sets is not so you can warm up more. You're going to do more working sets with it. So let's say, for instance, you bench press 225, like you said, or whatever. You might do, you 135. You might go up to say whatever the next 185. Then you might go 200. 225, and then what I would do is I would take breaks. I'd do 3-4 minute rest, and I would do 225, and then maybe if you have a training partner there, move it up. Now you have an opportunity that you want to go up in weight. So even though you can only do 225 for 4 reps, now you're going to try to do 240 or 250, for even 1 or 2. Even if you need to have your partner help you with the 1 or 2 or 3 reps, forced reps. That's how you grow. Okay. The idea is you don't have to worry about doing anything after that. You're done with chest after that. So you focus on the one movement, incline presses or flat presses, whichever you're doing for that day. You're doing 8 sets of it. You're going to work on getting stronger those days. You're going to, once again, you need a training partner for this type of training. You can't go in there yourself and do it because you cannot spot yourself, obviously. You're going to need someone to push you through these reps. You might go do your heaviest weight. Instead of doing the 4 you normally could do yourself, you might do 8, but you might have your partner help you a little bit. You might do a strip set and drop it down to 1 plate on each side and do a couple more. But the great thing is that you're going to be shot when you're done doing these 8 sets, and you're going to go home after that, rather than have to then go to another exercise. Because when you know in your brain, I got 2 more exercises, 3 or 4 sets each for those exercises, you're not going to push to the ultimate limit on the exercise you're doing. This enables you to focus on that one movement.
Guys, we have 2 insulin-related questions, so I'll take the first one from Fernando Arroyo. Again, we're on our Instagram page now. If you're not already following us, it's official_RxMuscle. Fernando Arroyo, What are the care that should be taken while taking insulin to avoid health risks?
Well, insulin is not bad for you in the sense that it's not toxic or anything like that. The problem with insulin, the number one mistake that I think, the dangerous mistake that people can make is they don't measure the insulin properly. Okay, you tell someone to take 6 IUs and they're taking 60 IUs. Okay, insulin syringes measure insulin units. So if you have a half a cc syringe, okay, every single little line is 1 unit. So when you see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, the 10 means 10 units. Okay. The 20 means 20 units. You're not going to be taking 20 units, All right? And now, whether you're taking a fast-acting or short-acting, it still measures insulin units. So if you were taking Lantus, which is long-acting, and you had to take 15 units before bed, it's still, you go to the 10 mark, you go 5 more, and you got your 15 units. It's the same. They purposely dilute insulin so that you're measuring, the syringes perfectly measure the units on the insulin syringes. So that's number one, okay? Number two is, are you eating enough carbs to cover the insulin that you're taking? So if you're taking a shot of, let's just say, Humulin R, 10 IUs, okay, 10 units. For Humulin R, because it's not super fast acting, but it's faster acting, you need to take 5 grams of carbs per unit. So, if you're taking 10 units of this stuff and you're eating 50 grams of carbs now and then 50 grams of carbs at your next meal in 2 hours, you're going to cover your insulin. If you eat 40 grams or 30 grams of carbs, you might go a little low. Now, you're not going to die from it. You're going to feel like low blood sugar, and you're going to have to eat more. If you did 50 units instead of 10 by accident because you didn't measure right, okay, now you might drop your blood sugar very, very rapidly, and that might be scary, okay? I can understand that, but that's because you're not measuring the stuff correctly. So I guess you could say the danger in insulin lies in ignorance, basically, not understanding how to use it properly, or not being advised how to use it properly. There are people out there to tell you to take 20 units of insulin before you go to the gym. That's fucking nuts, as far as I'm concerned, because you're going to take that much insulin. Now you need 200 grams of carbs to cover that insulin. Why would you do that right before you go to the gym? You're going to train, you're going to be using glucose, and that's going to lower your blood sugar. So that's not smart. So people do dumb stuff, have dumb shit happen to them, and that makes it dangerous as well. So before you start using insulin, make sure you understand how to measure it. Make sure you have someone who's advising you, who knows what they're talking about, and is not going to do anything dangerous with you. And and don't be ignorant about insulin, because that's something that acts very quickly. Whereas an anabolic steroid, you take a shot of that, it takes 2 weeks to work. So you're not going to drop dead the next day, or you're not going to have any incident. The problem with that is, are you using real steroids? The good thing about insulin is I've never seen a fake insulin out there. So because most people get it from a pharmacy, it's not like you can make that in your bathtub. So that's a good thing.
So let's continue with that. Jacoby Al wants to know, why did Jason Arns, who you had on the show about a couple of weeks ago, he thinks you could become diabetic by using insulin, where you have said before that it takes the burden off but doesn't shut it down. Who's right in that argument?
Yeah, I mean, I just think Jason just didn't speak right. I think he might have confused himself. Obviously, not taking insulin, and putting your body in a state of insulin resistance constantly, where your body can't produce enough insulin, is going to make you much more susceptible to becoming diabetic, because you're going to burn out your pancreas. Taking insulin is taking the burden off the pancreas. It doesn't have to produce as much insulin. It's much less likely to burn out in that sense, or die off, and so that's going to preserve beta cell function. So, back in the 90s and early 2000s, people thought if you took insulin, you could become diabetic. They didn't understand the dynamics of how it worked. I'm not saying Jason doesn't. Jason's a smart guy. I think he misspoke, in terms of saying that. But the bottom line is, yes, taking insulin is going to help you, stop from becoming a diabetic.
Let's go to Pumping Rob. Dave, how can I get details in my legs? I'm lean, but I can't see separation and veins. Do I simply not have enough muscle?
It's possible, or I don't have pictures of you, so it's hard for me to say, or you might just be very depleted. When you're glycogen depleted, even though you're lean, the muscles are not stretching the skin tight. So I see a lot of guys, they think they look terrible. I'm like, just wait till I carb you up. And then as soon as you put the carbs back in, everything just comes alive, because now the muscles fill up, the skin gets tight, and it sticks to it like adheres to the muscles. You see all the separation and grooves. You take the water out and everything looks great. So, it depends on where you are. Some guys have to really extremely deplete to get in shape to lose the body fat on their body. Sometimes they go too much. I remember in '96 when I was getting ready for the USA, I was just dieting too hard, and I didn't need to. I was probably ready to go at 270 pounds, and I dieted down to 255, and because I just kept wanting to get harder and harder and harder. And after a while, you just don't get any harder. You get flatter and flatter, and if you stay flat too long, you can lose muscle. So you got to know when to, that's why with certain, when I work with people, if they're flat if they get too flat, a lot of times I'll just feed them out of nowhere, and they're like, "What do you mean? You've been starving me for for 2 weeks. Now you want me to have a cheeseburger and fries?" I'm like, "Yeah," and then they eat the cheeseburger and fries, and the next day they look wacky, So once again, you have to know when. That's why it's important to have a coach that knows what they're doing, so that they can look at you and they know when to make you suffer, and they know when they have to pull back. Sometimes I'm working people, working. I want them to get leaner, and I just noticed that nothing's working. So I instead of giving them 2.5 hours of cardio again the next day, I tell them no cardio. And they're like, "What? No cardio?" It's like you gave them a day off from school or something like that. And they almost don't know what to do with themselves because they just their bodies need rest. And so you have to know when to, you have to know when to push and you have to know when to pull back a little bit.
Let's go to Reds55 Ranky. During your suggested detox cycle, you say to take apple cider vinegar, but also state that the body likes to be in an alkaline state, which helps prevent cancer. I find it odd that we do both in a detox. Can you elaborate on the apple cider as part of that process?
I've done a video on apple cider vinegar, which beyond I don't even know what it's up to, Sid. It's probably like 2 million hits, this thing, right? It's crazy. But, apple cider vinegar, when you put the acidity of apple cider vinegar into your body, it tells your body to stop producing as much acid. That's why if you have indigestion, you take apple cider vinegar, it kind of takes it away because it turns off the acid production in your body. Likewise, the ash or the pulp of the apple, because Bragg's apple cider vinegar is unfiltered. It's the pulp of the apple that's in there actually has an alkalinizing effect on the body. Now we can go and debate this, and I know there's the people out there that think it's bullshit, but you know what? Until you use the apple cider vinegar and you feel how good you feel on it, then you'll know that it works. It seems like a little pseudoscience-y, but it makes sense. If you're taking a mild acid, it basically tells your body to stop producing that strong acid in the stomach, which in essence reduces acidity in that area. Once again, and also the pulp of the apple will have an alkalinizing effect on the body. And that's how it works. So, it sounds weird, but you're replacing a stronger acid in your body with a weaker acid through the apple cider, and that's why you can kind of instantly cure acid reflux. If I go out to a crappy restaurant, and I have a little cheat meal or something like that, I always come home with I'm burping up. As soon as I do the apple cider vinegar and 8 ounces of water, boom, it's gone. The acidity goes away instantly. I have no more burps. It's like a miracle cure. And like I said, try it. Once you don't have to believe me, do it. You'll see what I'm talking about. It works.
Oh, Jalanico has a question about you during your competition career. Why did Dave cut so much weight for his competitions? He was pretty shredded at 315.
Yeah, everyone always used to say, compete at 300. Compete at 300. Well, in the gym in the tank top, I look like a freak at 300. But, I did a show, the North Americans, in 2001. I was 282 I weighed it at. That was the heaviest I was. Usually I competed around 265. 265 to 268, around there. That was a good weight for me. But when I competed at 282, I looked really good. I was huge, But I lacked the Dave Palumbo separation and conditioning that people were used to. I was still the most conditioned guy on stage, no doubt about it. Glutes, everything. But I just wasn't as hard. Now, if I had the shape of some of these other guys out there, that were gifted in that sense, and I had a nice V taper, and I had better genetics in the structural component, I wouldn't need to be as hard as I would. But in order to beat guys that had structures better than me, I had to be crazy conditioned beyond conditioning, so that people would say, "Holy mackerel, we can't not give this guy the win," Because if I was the same as them, or if I was just a little better conditioning wise, then I wasn't that much different, And for some reason, I didn't look as big on stage when I wasn't as wacky conditioned. Now, once again, if you put me in the gym for a photo shoot after, I look retarded, and that's really what I think people responded favorably to. And I wish I had more pictures from back then, because we didn't have cell phones to take pictures like that. Those pictures would have been priceless, because I had there were days that I just was in the gym and I was like, holy man, I couldn't believe what I looked like. But no one had a camera back then. It just, I impressed the people in the gym. And that's why you hear people every once in a while come on and tell stories about seeing me at a show or wearing this outfit or that outfit, because people didn't see, there wasn't a lot of people like me walking around at that time. And, probably me and Greg Kovacs, there was a couple just nutty looking people that had a lot of size in them, but it wasn't a lot. So we were far and few between. But once again, there was no cameras back then, so we just don't have a lot of documentation of that. But yeah, that's the reason.
Let's go to Ivan Bodybuilding. Tom Platz says that he looked much better when he was eating around 400 grams of carbs during his prep and only 9 grams of fats. What do you think about that? Many bodybuilders are prepping on low fat and have amazing results, even though a high fat diet really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, when you're eating a lot of protein, if you're eating 600 grams of protein a day, you're eating a lot of fat indirectly, okay? You're probably eating, 150 grams of fat just indirectly from the protein sources. So what and I've said this before, a lot of guys are getting a lot of fat in their diet indirectly because they don't even realize it. And that's why they don't understand why they have to eat so much protein. Because I know pros, they're eating 500-600 grams of protein a day, and they don't, and I have guys I help and I give them 400 grams of protein a day and they're fine because I'm feeding them fat. The difference is that when you do get your fat indirectly from your protein sources, you're getting all saturated fat essentially, because it's mostly coming from chicken and red meat, or a little bit of fish fat obviously in there as well, which is good. But the bottom line is that when you pick the fat sources, you can choose better sources of fat, essential fatty acids. You can choose more monounsaturates like macadamia nut oil and avocados. You can choose omega-3 fats from fish oils and from sources like that. So you have more control over it. I like to control that better. Now, in Tom Platz's day, okay, as well as in the beginning of my career, which started at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, no one ate fat. We didn't do fat. It was protein and carbs, and that was it. So when you don't eat any fat, calorically you're pretty low, so you need to eat those carbs to make up for the caloric deficit, because let's face it, when you're training in the gym, you're expending a lot of calories, so if you're not eating fat, you better eat your carbs or you're going to lose muscle. And that's a lot of guys noticed that if they didn't eat enough carbs, and even if they did eat carbs, they still were going flat, and they didn't understand why. It was because they were fat deprived. Then what started happening is, before the fat revolution, I kind of brought in a lot of the fat stuff into the bodybuilding world, but before that, guys were noticing that I got to eat more red meat. If I eat red meat, I stay fuller. Well, why was that? Well, because the red meat had fat in it, whereas lean chicken breast and fish didn't. So that's where people were getting their fats, and that's how I discovered. I started eating McDonald's hamburgers. I'm like, I'm freaking growing. I can't believe this. What's going on here? Well, what's in McDonald's hamburgers that's not in everything else? Well, fat. That was the difference. And that's when I started exploring what fat was and what fats were essential to the diet and which weren't. Because all fats are really conditionally essential. Even saturated fat is essential, because the cholesterol in the saturated fat that we get from like red meat and some chicken is what your body uses to make testosterone. So you do need all kinds of fats. It's just got to be in the right ratios. And I have found over the years that the right ratio is the majority of fats should come from the monounsaturated fats, which are the heart-healthy, very clean-burning fats, like your macadamia nut oils, like your extra virgin olive oils, like your avocado oils.
Let's go to Banyunats Ivan. If a competition prep lasts for 16 weeks and you're around 15% body fat, with how much cardio would you start, and how often would you increase it? Same thing with carbs. How much percent-wise would you cut at the beginning, and how often would you modify? Usually, I know it's always different.
Yeah. Give me 100 guys, I'll give you 100 different ways to start cardio and start carbohydrate intake. Everyone's different. You got to know who you're dealing with. If I'm working with a guy who has a crazy fast metabolism, I'm going to start him on 20 minutes of cardio maybe twice a week, and see how his body responds. I might start him on 300 grams a day of carbs, 350, maybe more, depending on what his metabolism is like. If I got a guy with a slow metabolism, he's got a lot of body fat to lose, I'm going to start him on, maybe 30 minutes of cardio every day and see how that responds to, how he responds to that. And I'm going to, also have him eating a lot less carbs to start. because I know his metabolism. Now, if I'm working with someone I never worked with before and they tell me they have a fast metabolism or they have a slow metabolism, that's good data to have ahead of time, but I usually put them on a moderate approach and then see if I need to add or take away food. And that's where coaching comes in, because everyone is different. And I have a generalized idea in my mind, template-wise, what people need to be on given what their body weight is and what their goals are. But sometimes I'm 100% wrong, and sometimes I'm 100% right. And that's why we started 16 to 18 weeks out, so we can play around the first few weeks and figuring out what needs to be done and what not. Sometimes I'm terrible. Sometimes I give someone a diet and they're losing way too much weight, and I can tell that they're just flat as can be, and they just don't. I need to give them more food, and they're starving to death. Then I have people who tell me they're starving to death and they haven't lost a pound. I'm like, I don't care if you're starving to death because you haven't lost any weight. So obviously you're not losing any muscle. That's the funniest thing. I have people contact me, they're like, I'm ravenous, I must be losing muscle. I'm like, well, how much weight did you lose this past 5 days, since the last update? Well, I actually gained a pound. All right, well, how did you lose muscle if you gained a pound? And it's usually because they're eating extra food. So, you can't, you have to really, just know your person and do a little trial and error at first, and then you'll get the system. By 2 or 3 weeks in, you know what you have to feed people.
Let's go to Alexander Jeramazov. Since building a spectacular physique requires a lot of money for food, supplements, enhancements to be able to turn pro, what are your tips for making money as an amateur who just started competing?
It's hard. It's hard when you first start, because even if you have knowledge, even if you watch this show every single week and you're a Dave Palumbo disciple and you have all that knowledge, no one thinks that you know what you're talking about because you don't have the physique to demonstrate it. You know what I mean? Once you start winning shows or once you start looking good, then people want to know what you're doing. And I have a lot of people that I help. I have guys that are teenagers that I help and that are doing diets for other people and making money, with other teenagers. So you could always, the great thing about today's marketplace is that you can make money doing coaching. And you know what? If I was a young guy and I loved the bodybuilding world and I wanted to make money as a coach, because you can make 6 figures easy a year as a coach down the road if you really know what you're doing and you build up a clientele, I would be taking the Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru course that I give. It's a 1-day course out of your life. You'll sit there and you'll at least have a baseline of knowledge so that when you give diets out to people, you can troubleshoot problems, you understand the different steroids and how they interact, you understand supplements, and you understand basic nutrition 101, protein, fat, carbs, how to write diets, how to include the right supplements to help assist with the dieting process or the muscle building process. You do that, and now you have a vehicle to make money for yourself. Even if you have 1 or 2 clients, that's your food money for the week. And you have to look at it from that perspective. Don't try to conquer the world. Don't look, oh my God, I gotta make $100,000 a year starting tomorrow. No, make your food money for the week first. Then go for your rent. Then go for your car insurance, that kind of stuff. You build up little by little, and the more successful you are yourself and the more successful you are with helping people, the more people that are gonna come to you. And that's just how it works. And you have to take the steps, small steps at a time. But the most important aspect is educating yourself, because ignorance is no excuse.
Let's go to RR Prov. A couple of questions on cutting. Can you substitute Tren E for Tren A when cutting? Just adjust the dose accordingly, as Tren A has more active ingredient.
Yeah, Tren is Tren. It's one's faster acting, one's slower acting. I personally believe that Tren acetate is a better drug. I think it has more of an anti-catabolic effect. It blocks the effects of cortisol better. And I don't know if that's because of the speed with which it's released into the system. I've just found that it works a little better pre-contest. It also makes you a little crazier, and it makes it much harder to sleep. The Tren enanthate, which is slower acting, which is, that seems to be a little more controllable. You don't seem to get the ups and downs so much mood-wise. It doesn't seem to affect your digestive system as severely. So for a lot of people, the longer acting one is a better choice. But if you can handle the Tren acetate, I would say do that. Now, here's the thing. I was giving people 100 milligrams a day, and I still give some people 100 milligrams every other day, of the Tren acetate. I've been cutting it back to 50. Back when I was competing, I was using 50 every other day, and I got really good results with it. I think when you cut it back, you're getting the same benefits with less of the side effects. I think a lot of guys are getting more side effects nowadays, especially with the the inability to have an erection because they're raising prolactin too high, inability to sleep at night. Some of them people are getting indigestion from it. I think it's because they're taking too much of the trinacetate. Try to cycle that back a little bit. Less is better with the trinacetate. It hits you so quickly that you don't really need a lot. Whereas with the trinanthate, you could take 100 milligrams 2 to 3 times a week, and it doesn't seem to have any negative effects.
Another cutting questions from Marky Mart's: creatine while cutting beneficial, and if not, why?
Yeah, I like creatine because it keeps a little water on the muscles, which helps protect the joints a little bit while you're dieting. You got to just remember that at 2 weeks out from a competition, cut it out. It's not necessary. That'll let all the extra water kind of subside, and you certainly don't want a creatine load. Someone asked me the other day, should I take creatine like the last 3 days before a show to look fuller on stage? I'm like, first of all, you absolutely don't want to take creatine the day of the show when you're not drinking. That's the most dangerous to your kidneys. You need to be well hydrated when you're taking a creatine supplement. So creatine's fine if you want it and if you like it and you like the way you're feeling it, but you cut it out 2 weeks before.
I know we're pressed against the clock. I wanted to get a couple of more in. The celery juice phenomenon. Cylinder Brandon's been doing it a couple of weeks now, has had good results. A lot of people are talking about it. He says it's helped with his bloating and with his skin. Is this something that should be postponed during prep? So I guess first your general thoughts, and then in regards to prep.
I didn't even hear what you said. What was the
celery juice phenomenon?
Celery juice?
Yeah, I guess a lot of fitness influencers are now talking about jumping on celery juice. So
celery juice.
Celery juice, yeah.
Look, I've heard about juice. There's so many juicing detoxes, juicing health promoting effects. This has been going on since Jack LaLanne, guys. Jack LaLanne was juicing vegetables back, 30 years ago, and people were doing that. I don't have anything against. I was juicing vegetables at night. Now the key is with juicing, and celery juice is good because it's a green. You don't want to be juicing stuff that has a lot of sugar in it, like carrots and apples and all kinds of fruits. But once again, it's an alkalinizing type of supplement. The problem is it's a pain in the ass if you don't juice it yourself fresh. You're not getting the benefits out of it because a lot of times it gets oxidized if it's in a bottle. And if you do it yourself, you got to clean the juicer. It's a pain in the ass. So personally, I use a green supplement. I use a product called Juice Plus. I've been using it for years. It's all the phytonutrients in a capsule with none of the sugar. Obviously, there's no liquid and there's no fiber. That's all removed. And it's fruit. There's a fruit bottle and there's a vegetable bottle, and I've been doing them for 25 years. And I'll tell you something. When I get sick, it lasts a half a day. I just don't get sick for a long period of time. Very rarely do I get hit with anything, and I really attribute it to that. I'm a big believer in fruit and vegetable extracts. I think they're really good for you. I think that there is a place, if you have the extra cash and you can buy a product like Juice Plus, it's about $40 a month. I have a link on my DavePalumbo.com website if you want to get it. Then great, you can do it. But obviously you don't want to take that and not take your multivitamin, multimineral, your essential fatty acids. So I wouldn't call it a must-have supplement. It's a luxury item for sure. But if you have extra money, it definitely works. Once again, I'm not into the juicing of the vegetables. I don't have time to clean juicers and go buy fresh vegetables every single day. So, if that's something you want to do, that's great. But like I said, watch. Certain vegetables have a lot of sugar in them. And when you concentrate them in a juice form, obviously that could screw up your diet. So you got to be very careful with that.
Eberg 1971, when calculating calories, do you factor age into the equation or just activity level?
I know guys that are 60 years old that have better metabolisms than 20-year-olds, and vice versa. So it depends on the person. I treat everyone as if they're a human being, and I don't necessarily give less food. Although I will tell you one thing, with older people, if I'm dealing with guys over 50 and 60, I don't give them as much protein. Usually they don't need as much. It's weird. It's when you get older, you become more efficient at extracting what you need from the protein you eat. That's why I found, at least when I started getting older, I didn't eat as much food to maintain my muscle mass anymore. And I don't know, like I said, if it's just because I had a lot of muscle for a long period of time or what. So the only thing I really adjust, like you said, is the protein amount. I think younger people could handle more protein. Kidneys are fresher. They can do better stuff with it. I find that if you overwhelm older people with too much protein, their creatinine levels go up a little bit.
Reg Radke, what's your go-to now for Watershed now that he says your product, Aqualize, is discontinued?
With guys that take anabolics and stuff like that, I usually use, we usually use prescription diuretics like Diazide. That's my go-to. For people who are, don't want to use a prescription diuretic or who are natural bodybuilders, because I don't produce alkalies anymore, I just tell people to go buy generic YouGottaBeAFreak. I said it on the last show too. It's UVAURSI. You can go on Amazon and get a bottle of it. And I usually use about 800 milligrams of the stuff with every meal the day before a show, and that works pretty well. It's pretty strong, it's pretty reliable, and it works. You can do too much of it. I know I was helping someone who just came to me. I think they wanted me to help them with the last few weeks of their prep, and they were on YouGottaBeAFreak every day already, and it was like 4 weeks out. I'm like, you can't. This stuff is serious. This stuff works. You can't walk around dehydrated. You're gonna feel like you have a hangover for the next 4 weeks. So yeah, you don't want to be dehydrated for long periods of time. That makes you very catabolic, and obviously puts a lot of stress on the kidneys.
1.5 more questions. Benjamin Piscina, Dave, if you could go back in time and give young Dave 3 pieces of bodybuilding advice, what would they be?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't really have any regrets in my bodybuilding life, because I always say, people always say, well, you had bad shoulders. Would you train differently? I don't know. I don't know. If I trained differently, maybe I wouldn't have been as big as I am now. So that would be tough. I probably would have, I would have started out, training differently because I overtrained for so long in the beginning part of my career. I would have cut that out. Obviously, I would have put fats into my diet much earlier on, and I wouldn't have eaten as clean. And I probably, when I competed, I probably would not have over dieted, for a couple of the shows that I did, thinking that more was better. I think I would have had a little bit more, balance, because I had a tendency to overdo it because I wanted to be so good and to be my best. And, I had that runner's mentality that more is better, more is better. And it took me a while to kind of calm down on that and realize that it was all about balance.
One more question from Patrick's Effect. Dave, where is Jimmy the Bull?
I just talked to Jimmy the Bull the other day, and he's still in New York. He's driving a truck, doing his thing, making his money, and I've been working on him to try to get him down to Florida for the last 2 years to move down here permanently. And he keeps telling me, yeah, I'm going to do it. And Jimmy. Jimmy's like my father. It's like having my father back. Like, it's like trying to get my dad to do anything was brutal, because even though he's not happy in what he's doing, he'll still stay in the same environment because he has a fear of change of environment. So I'll get Jimmy down here. I got to keep working on him. And once he is, obviously if I get him to move down here, I'll have him on the TV show. At least he'll have his own show once a week. That'll be great. So I told him and Jimmy loves to come on the TV show. You know that. So you never know. The Bull might be down here one of these days.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Again, brought to you by Species Nutrition, Liquid Sunrays, and Ariel Cuts. For our producer, Tyler Shore and Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.